here.
Sounds good. Have a good night.
Okay, this is NU1U, your net control station, for the 7:30 February 4th, 2021 Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet. Tonight's topic of discussion will be 8 months of ham, which is a presentation I created as a new ham 8 months into my amateur radio career. First off, I'd like to thank Ed W1YSM for spearheading the synergies between the Meriden and Middlesex radio clubs in Connecticut. Additional thanks to James AB1DQ for coordinating these nets and for the invitation to present and get involved. And I'm also going to thank Rob K1RCT for hosting the Zoom meeting that we are using to simulcast this TechNet. Tonight's net is being broadcast on the W1KKF/R repeater in Wallingford. Access is via the 147.360 with a plus offset and no PL tone. Echolink access is available on the W1NRG-R node and also online via Zoom. The link can be found on both the Meriden Amateur Radio Club and Middlesex Amateur Radio Society Facebook pages. The password to the meeting, when prompted, is 123456. Again, that password is 123456. This TechNet takes place bi-weekly. The next net will be on February 18th at 7:30 p.m. K1RCT and AB1DQ will be talking about grounding and RF safety, so be sure to mark your calendars. For tonight's net, I will be taking radio check-ins. Please provide your call sign, name, and location. There is a high probability that the calls for those check-ins will be somewhat new to me, so Sloan phonetically will help me out. And if I have missed your call sign or gotten it wrong, please check in again. Priority will be given to Echolink and mobile stations. So currently, if you are on Echolink or mobile, call now. KC101P. All right, we got AB1DQ. Okay, so for Echolink and mobile check-ins, I have KC1OMP and AB1DQ. Are there any other mobile or Echolink stations? Please call now. All right, nothing heard. So we're going to go to general check-ins now. General check-ins for tonight's TechNet. Please call now. K1 JCF Joe. All right, we got N1LES Joe. All right, N1BLO Bart. All right, I think that was W1DQ, John. All right, we got KC1NXP Andy. KB1AU Bob. I missed that one. All right, so the net recognizes K1JCF, N1LES, N1BRL, W1DQ, KC1NXP, KB1AU, and I missed that last one, KB1 question mark. KB1GYZ, got it. Are there any other stations wishing to check into tonight's TechNet? Please call now. Okay, Jim N1ZN is looking for the link. If someone could send that to him in email. All right, N1ZN, I've relayed the request to the folks in Zoom. Someone's going to, I believe, send you out an email link for the Zoom meeting. And with that, are there any other stations wishing to check in to tonight's Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet? Please call now. KC1NXP is also looking for the link if someone can forward that to him. All right, we got K1HEJ, Larry. Okay, KC1NXP, I also relayed to the Zoom meeting to forward you the link to Zoom. And I have check-in for K1HEJ, Larry. I got you loud and clear. So again, I'm going to give another call out, see if there's any other stations wishing to check in to tonight's Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet. Please call now. All right, nothing heard. So we are going to begin tonight's TechNet. It's being simulcast again on the repeater that you folks are listening to now, and Zoom. If you did not get the Zoom link, I do believe that we're blasting out that Zoom link again. So it's either there, or you can go to the Middlesex Amateur Radio Club or Meriden Amateur Radio Club Facebook pages. Both of them have the links posted there as well. So with that, I am going to share my screen now. Okay, so tonight's presentation is called 8 Months of Ham from Bofang to FT8. I presented this when I was 8 months into the hobby, and really what I was trying to do was two things. One was give a perspective to hams that have been in it for a while, what it feels like to be a new ham again, because there's a lot to ham radio, and you just don't realize it if you've been around it for a while. And then also I wanted to give this presentation for new hams so that they could kind of see a little bit of the things that you can work yourself into. Breaking for the repeater. So what I did getting into ham radio is I did kind of a shotgun approach, didn't know what I wanted to get into. So I kind of just started doing stuff. But before I even go into all of the doing stuff, I'm going to start from the very beginning and how I got into ham radio. The way that I got into ham radio is that I was at a training for work, and it was a wireless site survey class. And because of wireless, we got to talking. And one of the folks in the class said that you could buy a radio on eBay that was 20 bucks and it was outlawed by the FCC. So I'm a kind of a hacker. I like to mess with things. And when you tell me that there's a radio that you can buy for $20 and it's outlawed by a government agency, I'm all about it. So that night I went on eBay and I spent 20 bucks and I bought a Bofang radio. I didn't realize that the reason why it was outlawed was because of, you know, the being able to transmit out of amateur radio band, spurious emissions, all of that sort of stuff. So it wasn't really outlawed, but it piqued my interest enough to buy this $20 gadget. And sure enough, I now had this radio that I could program to listen to the local fire department, police department, and I programmed in the local ham radio repeater in East Hampton. So after a couple of weeks of listening, I was like, well, this is lame. I can't transmit. So I need to transmit on this thing. And I researched what it was going to take to get a license and get on the air. So that's what the goal was to move on from I've got this $20 radio to I want to be able to push the button. Now for me, getting to push the button, I want to go from point A to point B very quickly. I don't want to try and figure out this is what I want to do. I want to do it. So the first thing that I did was I ordered the ham radio license manual from the ARRL. And I read it. I read it around Thanksgiving 2018, I think it was. And it was okay. It wasn't great. I mean, it's sort of like if you want to drive a car and you're reading the car manual. It's not the best way to learn how to drive. So I was like, well, all right, what's the quickest way now? I've read the book, but I didn't get anything out of it. What do I got to do? So I downloaded this app by Roy Watson, a ham radio exam technician. And that gives you all the questions that are published online and in that book that you need to know with the answers in order to pass the test. So I used that app for between Thanksgiving and Christmas and took the test. And congratulations, I was licensed. I actually got licensed on the very last day of 2018. And that was just amazing. It felt amazing to now know that I could actually transmit and talk to all the guys that I've been listening to on the repeaters. Kind of felt like I knew them, but I just, you know, now I get to talk to them. But here's the thing is, now that I'm licensed, now what? I mean, I know that I can talk on this repeater that I've been listening to for a while, but I'm mic shy. I don't know any, well, I kind of do know these guys, but they don't know who I am. So what are the next steps? I really don't know. So now I've got this radio that I've been dying to push the button, but now I'm afraid to push the button because I don't know how the other guys are going to feel when I key up. I don't even know what the right process is to key up. Am I supposed to call out my call sign? Am I supposed to call for someone? I literally had no idea what to do next. So that's when I started to actually start to learn ham radio. So there's a bit to ham radio. It's not something where you know what you're going to do right away. I mean, you certainly can say, all right, I'm going to use it for emergencies. I'm going to use it on the CERT team, et cetera, et cetera. But to get the basics of some of the things you can do with a technician license, I kind of stepped through in this presentation some of the different things that I did as a tech. So there's a couple different ways that you can use UHF, VHF efficiently, inefficiently. Repeaters is where I started. So I programmed in a whole bunch of Connecticut repeaters, and I tried to hit some of them with my Bofang HT. Found out quickly that the East Hampton repeater, the town that I live in, was a really easy spot that I could hit with an HT, and I couldn't hit much else. So after talking on the local repeater for a little bit, it was like, okay, sometimes there's guys on, sometimes there aren't guys on. I don't know when we kind of get together at the watering hole to actually talk. On our website, we have, well, the Middlesex Amateur Radio Society's website, we have repeaters listed in their corresponding nets. So a time of nets, and I didn't even know what a net was at this point other than Friday night nets on my East Hampton repeater. So what I did was I took that Bofang, I programmed in the repeaters that had the nets listed, and I tried to get onto those. And that's a really good way as a new ham to start meeting people, is know when the nets are taking place. And for the hams that are on here that haven't participated in a net, well, you're actually participating in a net right now. It's where a whole bunch of hams will get together, check in, and depending on the type of net, you'll either talk about radios, you'll talk about swapping radios, you'll talk about the weather, you'll just talk about your day. A net is an organized time for everybody to get on the radio at the same time and let everybody know you're still all right, you're still alive. So this is NU1U for identification. Next up, we have Echolink. So this is the next thing that I learned how to do as a technician radio operator. One of the repeater systems that I talked on had this program called Echolink, and it allows you to talk on the radio from the internet. So again, if you're part of this net, another way to check into the net or listen to the net, if it's not via Zoom, is through Echolink. And for those who don't know what Echolink is, you download a program either on your phone or on your computer, and then you can log into nodes across the planet that are attached to repeaters for the most part, and you can talk ham radio from your home on that repeater to other folks. And on the Echolink system that I connected to, I'll pause for the repeater. On the Echolink system that I talk on, we regularly have check-ins from North Carolina, Alabama, and Japan. So it's pretty cool to be able to use a local repeater and have guys that aren't local be able to talk to you over the air, over ham radio. So I'm going to stop here to see if there's any questions about what I've talked about so far. A lot of this up to this point has been my personal experience. So if you have any questions about how I got to that point in my ham radio career, go for it. Okay, so I got nothing heard on the repeater and nothing heard in Zoom. So hopefully everybody's being entertained. We're moving on. Okay, so nothing heard on Zoom and nothing heard on the repeater, so we're going to move on. All right, so here's the point where we get to types of radios and how to get on the air as a technician. One of the things that you come to when you're a new ham radio operator, and it's a question you're going to ask when you're new to the hobby, is what radio do I get? And I've heard that question more times than I can count at our local club from a new ham saying to someone else, a more experienced ham, what radio should I get? And almost always I hear the answer is, well, what do you want to do? Which doesn't really help because you don't know, as a new ham, you don't know what you want to do. So what I try and do as a follow-up to that is, well, it depends on what you want to do. Here's the type of radios that I have, and here's what I do. Because I know I like the radios that I have, but it's because of the things that I do. So maybe I can help you by telling you what radios I have and the reasons why I have them. Breaking for the repeater. NU1U for identification. So is a new ham to technician class license using UHF, VHF, you basically have three places you can put a radio, three things you can do with a radio. And what I've done on the Zoom meeting is I kind of boxed out the different things that you need in order to talk on UHF VHF. So starting with a blue box, all you really need is you and an HT. That's as simple as it gets. So by HT, I mean handheld transmitter. So you have like a walkie-talkie looking radio, and it's your everything. It's got a battery built in. You program it on the local frequencies for the repeaters, or you can use the VFO and type in the frequency that you want to transmit on. And you can talk to others who have VHF, UHF radios, whether it be another HT or a base station. As long as it transmits on the technician frequencies, you can also transmit on it as well. So moving on to a mobile rig. So if you got the HT and now you want to actually use it while you're in motion, if you own a car, you obviously need the car, and you want to get that antenna on the outside of the car. I've heard a couple folks check into nets, and I've been guilty of this too, where my radio's not on in the car, or I'm not in a car that has a radio, and I'm trying to use my HT from inside a car. Very difficult because you're boxed in by metal, and that antenna is smaller, and your HT does not produce as much power as what a mobile rig will produce. So what you're going to want to do is you want to get yourself a mobile rig, which is usually on the 2 meter side, capped at about 50 watts. And then 70 is less. I can't remember exactly what they're usually transmitting at. I think it might be 25 watts. Don't quote me on that one. But what you're doing is you're plugging in that mobile radio unit to the car battery, not the cigarette lighter, because it doesn't produce enough amperage to power the radio. You really want to plug that straight into the battery. And I'm going to break for the repeater. And the other piece is that you want to get an antenna on the outside of the car. There's a few different antenna choices that you have. There's drill straight through your car and mount it directly to the roof of your car or the trunk. There's lip mount mounts, and you can have those be nice and stable and removable. Then there's also magnetic mount antennas, where you can take the antenna and just put it right on top of the car, and that's also a removable option. Personally, I don't use the magnet mounts because I had a bad experience when I delivered pizzas and we had those magnetic toppers, and it left big old magnet marks on the top of my car. I'm sure that there's ways around that, but I have a little trepidation when it comes to magnet mounts. And U1U for identification. And the last basic UHF VHF setup that you have is essentially taking that base station that you would put in your car, and there's other types of radios that you can keep in the house, but for the most part you can take that same base station and put it in your house. So the mobile rig is now your base station in your house, but here's the thing, it runs on DC voltage. So you need to convert that DC voltage, or the AC power from the wall, into DC voltage. How do you do that? A power supply. So on the Zoom meeting, I'm showing a picture of a power supply. There's many different types that you can get, but you want to be able to convert the AC voltage that's coming from the wall into DC voltage that your radio likes and will use. The last piece to that is, again, you need an antenna. So ideally, you want to put an antenna on the outside of your house and up high. That could be on a tower, that can be on the side of your house on the roof, that could be somewhere on top of your roof. Really, it's just a matter of getting the antenna somewhere on the outside of the house, and the best place is somewhere up high. Okay, and with that, I'm going to see first if there's any questions on the radio, and then I'll ask for Zoom questions. Okay, KC1OMP on the radio. KC1OMP, are you by any chance on the or able to get to the Zoom meeting, or would you like to join the Zoom meeting? Okay, KC1OMP, can you give that email one more time and I can read it off to the folks that are in the Zoom meeting and send you a link? Okay, so I think I missed the first couple of characters. I got Charlie, Foxtrot, Romeo, India, Echo, Sierra at yahoo.com. So it helps if I key up the radio. So I got a bit of your email. I got the last bit. So I got Charlie, Foxtrot, Romeo, India, Echo, Sierra at yahoo.com. What was the first piece? Okay, I'm getting his email. All right, awesome. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to relay that to the folks that are on the Zoom meeting. So the email address is Delta Charlie Foxtrot Romeo India Echo Sierra at yahoo.com. If someone could send him the Zoom link so that he can log into the Zoom meeting, we've got a new ham. Awesome. Thanks, guys. I'm getting positive confirmation that they're going to send it to you. So KC1OMP, I'm going to ask for Zoom questions now. So anyone on the Zoom that would like to ask a question, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question, but I'm typing an email address.
Okay, so I'll get to you, Rob, but AB1DQ, what's your question?
KKF, repeat. The time is HCM.
James, did you have a question? I thought I heard a call. Okay, awesome. So AB1DQ James, he was telling me that he didn't get into an HT for quite some time, had a mobile rig and mic shyness. Glad I'm not the only one. And then asked me what my path and process was to getting the mobile rig and base station, etc. So the reason why I got into the HT, obviously, as I was saying before, it was dirt cheap for an HT. It was 20 bucks. So I was into an HT before I even got my license. And I suspect that's how a lot of new hams are getting into it, is the fact that it's so cheap to get a Chinese radio now. You might as well do it. NU, 1U for identification. So I then got into not a mobile rig, but my base station. And my base station is actually pictured up there. It's the Kenwood TMV71A. And the reason why I got into that was because my HT just does not hit enough repeaters. It hits like a repeater. So I needed to get more power, and I needed to get an antenna so that I could actually check into the Middlesex nets, because I just couldn't. So I didn't want to drive anywhere and talk up on my HT. That's why I got myself a mobile base rig for home. So then the next step was, obviously, I wanted to ride around and play radio in the car. I was using the HT in the car. I actually attached an antenna to my HT in the car so that I could key up without buying a radio. Trying to save some money. Realized that ham radio, you're just going to spend money anyway. So I eventually used a mobile rig, a TYT 9800, and that's what I used for my mobile rig. So I started with my HT, then I went to a base station in the home, then to a mobile rig. Okay, so is there anyone else on the Zoom meeting that has a question? I'll listen on the Zoom meeting now.
Yeah, do is Rob, K1RCT.
Okay, K1RCT, go for it.
Thanks, Ant. Thanks for the opportunity, and thanks for taking another net. Interesting topic. I too started with a Bofang, and quick upgrade to a Bofang is to buy the Nagoya or some sort of whip antenna for it. I found that out pretty quick. But I had a kind of an off-topic question. It's about your Kenwood. I have one of those too, and we've used the one that we have up at the EOC where we normally meet. We've used that in crossband mode. We did a couple of tests on it. Wondering if you've ever had the opportunity to do crossband mode with your TMV71A.
Okay, so Rob asked if I've ever used my TM71A in crossband mode. No, you're talking about using it somewhat like a repeater, correct?
That's correct. That's correct. On one band, 2 meters, and out another band, or in one band like 440, 77 meters, and out 2 meters, and that kind of thing.
Okay, so yeah, Rob confirmed that in one band and going out on another band in a repeater-like fashion. I haven't. I've gotten to the point where I think I set it up, but then I never actually tried. And because it's at home, I would use it in that fashion if it was something that I popped in a box and brought with me. But no, I haven't. It's definitely a very versatile radio. I do like the fact that it's full duplex also, so you can listen on one frequency while transmitting on another frequency. So if you want to work satellites, you can use that radio for working satellites as long as you have a duplexer. So it's pretty neat. Actually, you don't even need a duplexer. It's built in. So does that answer the question, Rob?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I just looking for some experience.
Question.
All right, we got another question. I didn't see who it was from. W1DQ?
Yes, this is W1DQ.
Go
I've
for it.
been licensed for 64 years. I started with a key in a shortwave radio. How do you envision a new ham facing HF?
Okay, so sorry there. I was pausing for the repeater. The new ham and HF. I don't know. I wanted to get to HF, and I'm actually going to be moving into talking about HF in a little bit. But the new hams and HF, I think it's interesting. And like you said, you started with a key and a shortwave radio. Amateur radio and technology has been improving or working together as it's been moving on. And whereas Morse code is not dead, there's a lot of hams that do it, and God bless them for learning it. I really want to learn it myself, just I haven't gotten the time to learn it yet. But in a similar fashion, the digital modes on HF, especially FT8 and Whisper, some of those modes are very attractive for hams that want to go far and make long contacts, especially in a terrible solar cycle like we're in. If you want to make contacts, DX in other areas, other countries, HF is attractive, and also either having the patience and being able to learn Morse code, or getting your computer hooked up to your radio so that you can do some of those weak signal modes. I think that's like the next step when you get your ham radio technician license. What do I do next? That's a path that you can take, and that's one of the paths that I took. And awesome on you for having the license for so long. Are there any other questions on Zoom? All right, no questions on Zoom. Are there any other questions on HF? Or I'm sorry, HF, RF, go for it. All right, I got nothing heard on Zoom, nothing heard on the radio, so I'm gonna move on here and go to the next slide. Okay, so here's another thing that happens when you're a new ham. You start wanting to buy things, just all sorts of things. You want radios, you want things to connect the radios to, you want to be able to try new stuff. I mean, that's why you're in the hobby, or at least that's one of the reasons why you could be in the hobby, is you want to get on the air and you want all the toys that come with ham radio. So there's a few places that I went, and that being all the ones that are shown up on the screen. For those that are on the radio, we have Amazon, DX Engineering, Ham Radio Outlet, eBay. I mean, really the different stores are endless, and this isn't a comprehensive list. For sure, I have way more in my bookmarks for stores that I have purchased ham radio equipment from. One thing that I would say to any hams who are window shopping is don't look at something too long. I wasted a lot of my time looking at radios. And when I found a radio that I had looked at for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, etc., it started to get to the point, well, I know that I shouldn't spend the money, but I'm going to keep looking at this thing. I'm going to keep investing my time wanting this thing. Might as well buy it. So that's what I would say is, if you want something and you keep looking at it, just buy it. Just get it over with, because you're just going to be spending all your time wanting it instead of actually buying it and playing with it. And here's the thing with ham radio is that if you bought the thing and you didn't like it, there's a whole bunch of hams that'll buy it from you. I mean, you're not going to get what you paid for it, most likely, but just consider it a rental fee. You had to pay that money to rent it, to find out you didn't like it, and now you're going to sell it to some other ham. It works the same way if you're looking for something that another ham had done that with. You just look on eBay, you listen to a swap net, and you buy the thing that the other ham tried out and didn't want. There's a lot of good deals that you can find on eBay. There's a lot of good deals you can find from hams that just don't want to play with whatever it is anymore. But there's also some gotchas when you buy used. anyone you for identification. I haven't been burned on having a radio that didn't work. Everything that I've bought has worked, and it's been great. So just that's the caveat. When you buy new, you know what you're getting. You can probably return it if you get it from one of those stores online. But if you buy something used, you don't know what the condition's going to be. Okay, so here's on to the thing that I did not at all expect when I got into ham radio, and it's all the hidden costs. So when I went and got into ham radio, I was thinking to myself, okay, $20 radio, the book cost me $35, the app was free, the test cost me $15. All right, now I'm gonna get a radio. My radio, $400, power supply, another $100. We're just getting into it now. You got surge protection, you got weather protection, you got the programming cable, you got the window pass through, you got the cable to get up onto the roof, etc., etc. So there's a lot of different stuff that you can get into and you can buy or need to buy in order to get on the air. So with that, I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions about the hidden costs of amateur radio. But for me, that was one of the surprising things was, oh, it's not just the cost of a radio.
I don't know what to say. Can you hear me?
I can hear someone.
Oh, that must be me.
Yep, gotcha.
Oh, okay. I'm trying to learn this, and I'm getting up to speed. You know, in the beginning of your Zoom meeting, you said, you know, as you were beginning, I really have to appreciate your honesty in it, because I was in the same boat. Being a first-time user, I bought this radio bow thing, and damn, it's sitting there on the desk as I'm going through cancer surgery, and I'm saying, I want to do something with this, because I started reading about it. Even though it was the cheapest radio on the market, cost me $28, it just opened up a whole new world to me. And you guys are great in the amount of knowledge that you have, and how you share it is absolutely amazing. I really appreciate it. I hope you can hear me.
Yep. I can hear you just fine. I actually had the repeater keyed up so that everybody who's on RF could hear you as well.
Oh, God.
Yeah, no, it's always. I'm going to go back into the repeater
I
here.
really appreciate everything you're saying, and the amount of information you're throwing out is just so useful. It's appreciated, believe me.
Yeah, not a problem. So one thing that you get from the ham radio community is the only thing that we like more than talking on the radio is talking about the radios that we use to talk on the radio. So
yeah, I see that, but you know, that's really great, because you give a heads up on investing in particular types of equipment that you've already experienced, and
Yep.
that saves a lot of money.
Yep.
All the way
Yep.
down the line.
Absolutely. So that's the thing is when you ask what radio should I buy, and someone comes back with, well, what do you want to do? It's hard to know what you want to do because you haven't done it yet. So this is this kind of walks you through all the different things that you can do. And this is not all inclusive. I mean, the world of ham radio is ridiculous. And I'll get to something, a couple things that as a technician you can do that I think is the next step if you don't want to upgrade to general and you don't want to get into HF, because HF, those radios and rigs can be quite expensive depending on what type.
Yeah, I've done my homework, and you're absolutely right. And the amount of money is absolutely ridiculous. And I'm retired. I'm on a fixed income. And let's put it this way. Things are getting more expensive.
Yes, for sure.
So I want to be able to utilize, as my technician license, to what equipment's available, that's to what is within reason, to be able to do all the things that I can do. Yeah, and slowly take the baby steps forward. Because to do the general license, you know, I'm one of these guys, I can read it and I know it. but that doesn't mean I can make it useful to me. You know what I mean? I
For
can't.
sure.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Ab-
So we're on board.
Absolutely. All right, cool. Any other questions before I move on to some more stuff?
Stuff. I'm good.
All right, so it was Damien, correct?
Yes.
All right, so there at the bottom of your screen, left-hand side, there should be a mute key, and that's just so that if you
Oh, okay. I got it. I'll hit it right now.
perfect. If you want to talk again, just unmute or hit the space bar and hold it down. It'll let you continue talking. Okay, so that thing I said about buying equipment and then not really using it or not liking it, that box right there, that's a picture that I took, again, 8 months into it. I have a wall of stuff over here. And it's not even so much that I don't use it, but it's little pieces of things that I might use someday and I might need. And Winter Field Day was one of those days where I just brought everything. And there was some stuff that I used that I didn't think that I was going to use, but another station might need it, another guy might need it. You start collecting things over the years. I did it kind of fast, and I just, every time I see something cheap, I'll buy it just in case. But you'll start getting a pile like this as you get into ham radio, depending on which sections you go into and which things you want to do and not want to do. Okay, so everything up till now I had put into my original presentation for 8 months ham. This slide here I added because it's with a 2-year perspective. I've been into ham radio for just over 2 years now. And as a technician, there's these 2 things that you can do because you have access to the frequencies that are utilized for these 2 things. So the first one there on the left-hand side is AMSAT. If you want to operate satellites, what I mean by operate satellites is you can get a Yagi antenna, point it at a satellite going across the sky with your HT and transmit on it. It'll hit the satellite and repeat back to Earth. So you're basically using a repeater in the sky. So because the repeaters in the sky, those satellites are using 70 centimeter and 2 meter to relay the message, uplink and downlink are going to be on one of those 2 bands. You only need a technician license in order to work satellites. And there's a couple different types of satellites. I'm actually going to give a presentation on satellites in a month from now. But there's linear satellites, which are a little bit harder to get into, or there's FM satellites. FM satellites act just like repeaters down on Earth, except the repeaters that we're talking to now are usually transmit receive on the same band, different frequencies, but on the same band, whereas the satellites are transmit on one band, receive on another. So to get into those satellites, you don't need a lot of power. An HT will get in, 5 watts will get you into a satellite. And I'm gonna break for the repeater. And one U for identification. The thing with FM satellites though is because they're so easy to get into, all you need is an HT and an antenna. They're very busy. And as you can imagine, if you're trying to hit a repeater that's only in the sky that you can only see for 10 minutes, but yet half of the country can see that repeater, there's going to be a lot of activity on it. So it is fun. It's a super adrenaline rush. I would recommend, if you have a technician license, at least try it. If you don't have the radio to do it, find a guy that does it, like me, and set up a time so you can have fun and try it out. Okay, so the other thing, and I gave a presentation a month ago, is digital modes on your on a hotspot. So you can get a DMR radio and a hotspot. This DMR radio was just over $200. The hotspot that I have over here is about $100. So you're looking at around a $300 investment. And you connect the hotspot, and actually I'm showing the hotspots here. You connect the hotspots up to the internet. And now using the internet and your radio, you can talk to hams all over the world. So you don't need to upgrade a general in order to make long distance contacts. Now it's not the same thing. You're not worried about propagation. You're not worried about throwing antennas outside. But if you want to just talk to people and you want to key up at any time and just have folks listening, no matter what time of day it is, you can get into a very busy talk group on DMR and talk to folks in England, Australia, Texas, all that sort of stuff from a little mini repeater that you've built in your house. And again, very cheap way to get into talking to a bunch of folks. And now I say cheap because in ham radio, $300 is actually kind of cheap with the amount of money that you can spend on a radio. So I'm going to stop there, and first I'm going to ask if there's any questions on the repeater, and then I'll ask for Zoom questions. So are there any repeater questions? Okay, nothing heard on the repeater. Let me turn up my volume on Zoom and see if there's any Zoom questions.
K1RCT.
K1RCT, Rob, how goes?
Good talk. So I know you're going to hold a satellite session, but do you have a particular antenna that we should get for satellite work?
Okay, so Rob asked for particular antenna for satellite work. There are many that you can use, but the most popular one, and the one that I like the best, is the one that I have. It's an Arrow antenna. Trying to find it here. It's Arrow, whoops, arrowantennas.com, and you're looking at, I think this, oh Lord, solid element Yagis. Nope. I can find it and send it to you. It's on here somewhere.
Try the new Alaskan Arrow, first column.
Okay, so Rob's instructing me a new Alaskan Arrow. Yeah, you found it for me. So that's that looks like the antenna that I have, and there's two different types that you can buy. There's actually a few different types you can buy. One that's more portable, and the boom here can actually be broken down so that it's shorter. And then there's also the ones that have the duplexer built in. And I'm gonna break for the repeater. NU1U for identification. So the difference between the ones with the duplexers and the ones that don't is inside of the handle here, there's a duplexer. It'll support up to 10 watts of power. And so if you're connecting a radio to that, like an HT, it'll have the one input output for the antenna, but you want to break that into the 70 centimeter and 2 meter band. And that's what the duplexer allows you to do. Ideally, you want to have, if you're going to do that, a radio that has full duplex. So there's a couple radios that do that. The Kenwood TM71A is one of those ones that does that. So you could hook that up to here as long as you're transmitting under 10 watts. Or you can get the model that doesn't have the duplexer, and then you just connect two leads, the 70 centimeter and the 2 meter, to your radio. And that's what I do with the linear transponder that I have, which is the IC 9700. I really like satellites, and it's a really expensive radio, but I really like satellites, so I bought the really expensive radio. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. K1RCT.
Okay, cool. So Rob said that answered the question, and I definitely am going to give more of a detailed talk on working satellites, because it's like my absolute favorite now. But this is 2 years of ham, not 8 months of ham. So 8 months of ham me didn't know that satellites existed. All right, so what was the next step for me? The next step was, okay, I got my technician license. What am I going to do next? And that, what am I going to do next, was I want to operate HF, because as a technician, all I really had access to was this piece of the chart. So I was using 2 meters and I was using 70 centimeters. Realistically, I was only using 2 bands, and I'm breaking for the repeater. And U1U for identification, but look at all these other bands that I could potentially use. Why would you not want to do that? So what I did, actually, before I get into that, we're going to move on to the next slide. And not only do you get the ability to use more bands, but your reach is so much farther with HF. With VHF, UHF, you're looking at local, within line of sight most of the times. If you get a tropo duct, maybe sometimes you can get miles and miles and miles away, but that's weather dependent. So the reason why you want to upgrade to your general or upgrade to your extra is to get more bands that you can use. Upgrading to general gets you more bands. Upgrading to extra gets you more frequency usage on those bands. So I did the same thing with my general license that I did with my technician license. And that is, I studied the answers that were on the test. Horrible way to learn anything is to learn the answers to the test. You need to actually do. So what was the next step for me? Naturally, the question that I had was, what radio am I going to buy? What radio should I buy? So from that point, I kind of did the same thing that I did with my technician radios. I just Googled it. What best HF radio? So the best HF radio that I could find was the ICOM IC 7300. I mean, it's not the end-all be-all of HF amateur radios, but across all of YouTube, it seemed like everybody said the best bang for your buck is one of these. It's a software-defined radio. The software-defined means that those soft buttons in the middle where you see the ATT, hold, level, time, etc., you can press on that screen and it'll do things. It's not like the old school radios where you had a button for everything. This is software defined. It shows the waterfall. It allows you to go into different menus as you're touching the buttons on the screen. It's a very nice radio. It's around $1,000, so it's not a super expensive HF radio. And it gets you a lot of the features that you would use as a new HF operator. So that's how I got to the radio that I chose. Certainly there are other radios that are on the market that you can use, and I'm not one to tell you what radio to get, but I love my IC 7300. Our club uses an old Kenwood 570B, I believe. And then there's other HF radios that you can use for QRP. And for those that don't know what QRP is, operating at low power, they're small little radios. You toss them in the car. Yaesu's got some good models that are really nice and small. Again, like ICOM, Kenwood, and Yaesu are like the big three. There's Elecraft. There's so many different radios you can get. But when I Googled best HF radio for beginners, this is what came up. Okay, so I'm really hoping that this is going to work. This is a recording of me playing with my radio for the first time. Let me bring it back to the front here. Hopefully you guys can hear the audio.
That's about as good as I can get right now. Can't wait to figure this thing out.
Okay, thumbs up for the people on meeting that could actually hear that. All right, so I got a thumbs up. What was happening there is I just plugged in my radio. I got it connected to an antenna. I could actually hear some stations coming in, but all it sounded like was Charlie Brown teacher. Like all you could hear was squawk, 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 squawk. Now, as a new HF operator, general license, I studied the questions, I read the book, know nothing when I'm getting into it. We're on 14 megahertz, we're on the 20 meter band, and I've got the radio set to either FM or AM, which if you operate on the 20 meter band, you know that if you're doing FM or AM, you're not doing it right. When you get in the HF modes, usually you're looking at single sideband, either upper sideband or lower sideband. Maybe that was in the book, maybe that was on the test. I don't know, but nothing beats experience. And I had gotten this radio before field day, where our club operated HF, so I had no idea what I was doing. Okay, so I'm going to just give this little bit of information, then I'm going to break for questions. So what I tried to do next was figure out the radio. Just what am I doing with this radio? Came with a manual. The manual, it tells you all of the features and functions that are on the radio, but again, it's like a car manual. It's not going to get you there. So what I did was I went on Amazon and I found this guide to the ICOM IC7300, and it's amazing. It actually tells you why you're making the settings changes on the radio that you're going to make and what all the different menus are for. So instead of it being a this button does this button does that, this is the setting here, the guide to the IC7300 tells you why you're doing all that stuff and how you should set it in an ideal world. So I'm going to pause there and see if there's any stations on RF first that have any questions. Okay, so I didn't hear anything when I pulled the speakers out. I'm sure you guys didn't hear anything, or the headphones, I should say. So is there anybody on the Zoom meeting that has any questions? And I'm going to turn my speakers up now. Okay, nothing heard on the Zoom meeting. Hopefully, so far, everybody who knows all this stuff has been entertained by the trials and tribulations that I've gone through. And for anybody who's learning, hopefully this is informative. So next up, we have common HF antennas. Okay. So we're going to start from the left and work our way over to the right and above. simple common HF antennas that you can throw up in your backyard are a dipole. That's the one all the way to the left. Basically, there's a couple ways you can build it, but the one shown there, quarter wave is going to be one side of the antenna as far as length goes. Then there's going to be another quarter wave on the other side, and you're going to connect your coax straight to it. So that'll operate really good on one band and horribly on every other band. So what you're doing when you're putting up a dipole is you're trying to get the distance of that quarter wave to be the quarter wave of whatever band you're trying to operate on for each side. So a 20-meter dipole would be smaller than a 40-meter dipole, would be smaller than an 80-meter dipole. And you just cut the wire or buy the antenna for the band you want to use. So next up, if you want to run multi-band, you will need a tuner, probably a better tuner than what comes inside the IC 7300 or whatever radio you buy. So you want an external tuner for a G5RV. The G5RV is a antenna where it looks like a dipole, but then it has ladder line in the middle, and that ladder line has a different impedance, and then you connect your coax to that. Ultimately, what happens is it's kind of resonant on certain bands, so like 40, 15, 20, 10. It'll kind of on an SWR chart hit all of those bands. But if you really want to try and match the impedance that's coming into your radio, you're going to want a tuner. But if you want to operate on multi-bands and not have multiple dipole antennas, that's an option. Another option is an end-fed antenna. So there's a few different types of end-fed antennas. The two that I have operated on are end-fed half-wave antennas, where the wire is actually resonant on a frequency or multiple frequencies that are connected to a box, and that box has what's called an un-un, where you have an unbalanced antenna on the end of the un-un, and it's taking the impedance from that wire and converting it into the 50 ohms that needs to go into your radio. A common half-wave end-fed antenna would have a 49-to-1 un-un on it. I use a random wire un-un, end-fed random wire antenna, and that would have a 9-to-1 un-un. What I'm talking about is, again, inside that box, there's something like a toroid core where you're wrapping wire around it to bring the impedance to match it to 50 ohms, which is what you're expecting to see on your radio. Now I'm going to stop there and ask if my explanation of that was good for all the guys that actually understand that, and I wasn't just talking crazy talk. So if there's anybody on the Zoom meeting that wants to correct or help me out in anything that I misinformed the group, please talk now. Okay, nothing heard, so I'm going to assume that everything that I said is actually correct. So the one antenna that I have not tried is a vertical antenna for HF. And the reason why I haven't is because of when I first got into ham radio, a saying that I got, or I heard that stuck with me, is a dipole antenna will propagate in a certain pattern. A G5RV and an end-fed, it'll also propagate in a certain pattern, but a vertical HF antenna will propagate poorly in all directions. So that's not true, but it was a joke that I heard, and so that's why I've never used a vertical antenna. Now, as far as vertical versus horizontal antenna goes, I learned this on 10 meters. is that if you're trying to hit a 10-meter repeater that has a vertical antenna, don't be trying to hit it with a horizontal antenna, because if your polarization is 90 degrees, you're losing 20 dB of power to that antenna or to that other radio. And if I'm doing the conversion correctly, 20 dB of power is 100 times less powerful than what you're putting out. So if you're putting out 100 watts and your antenna is not polarized correctly, if it's 90 degrees off, you're only getting 1 watt out if the antenna is pretty much right next to you. Again, hopefully I'm stating that correctly. Okay, so when you're hanging the antenna outside, this is my G5 RV before I converted over to the NFED. If you can see there, the first picture on the upper left is where I initially had the antenna, and it's very, very low. If you put the antenna low to the ground, what's going to happen is as you transmit, it's going to shoot the signal almost straight up into the air. So everything's going up and then coming back down. It's called a near vertical incidence skywave, I believe, NVIS propagation. Hopefully I got the acronym right. So if you want to go out versus up, and if you go up, it's going to come back down because it's bouncing off the atmosphere depending on the frequency that you're using. You want to get that antenna up as high as you can. So I raised the antenna by taking a softball fishing line and hucking it up into the tree, and I got the antenna up much, much higher. One of the compromises that happened when I got the antenna up much, much higher is that no longer was the feed line perpendicular to the antenna. So I got a little bit of a mismatch on my SWR on 20 meters just because the feed line was getting so close to one of the legs of the antenna. Any questions on the simple HF antennas for the RF side of the house? Nothing heard RF. Are there any questions on the Zoom meeting for the simple antennas that I just talked about? All right, nothing heard on the Zoom meeting. Moving on. Oh man, was this a painful learning experience for me. Not all coax, just like it says here, is created equal. NU1U for identification. So as a ham who was new and didn't know any better, I went on Amazon and I did a search for ham radio coax, and I bought myself a whole bunch of RG8X. So RG8X, it's not so bad on the HF bands. I mean, you're going to get some loss because it's thinner wire, but on VHF, UHF, you're going to get a lot of loss. The higher the frequency you go, the more loss you're going to get in the cable, no matter what type of cable it is. The thicker the cable, the less loss you're going to get. So what I have here is I have a link on the PowerPoint that goes to a coax calculator. And what this can do is you can put in the type of coax that you're running, how long it's going to be, what frequency it's on, what SWR, and what power you're putting out. So what's going to happen is you click that calculate button, it's going to tell you how much power you're losing and how much power you're actually going to get out at the antenna. So with RG8X, and we're looking at a 2-meter band, talking on the 14709 Middlesex repeater, if I have a perfect SWR of 1:1, the power that I'm putting into it, which is the power that's going out on my my Kenwood here at 50 watts, at 100 feet, by the time it gets to the antenna, I'm really only getting out 19 watts. So even though I'm pumping out 50 watts, I'm losing more than half of that just in the antenna wire. So what I did is after I realized what my mistake was, I went and bought some LMR 400 wire. So with LMR 400 at 100 feet, assuming 1-to-1 and the same frequency, putting out 50 watts, I actually at the antenna get 35 watts of power out, significantly more than the 19 watts. So every, let's see what I get, 10, so that's what, almost double the power out at the antenna just by changing the antenna cable. So LMR 400 is more expensive because it is thicker, but you're getting what you pay for. This RG8X was very cheap. This LMR 400 was more expensive, but I'm able to hit and hear a lot more repeaters. Moving on up to the HF bands, your loss is less in the cable, no matter what type of cable you have here. So at 20 meters, which is the 14 megahertz frequency, I put it on the FT8 frequency. My transceiver, the IC 7300, can put out 100 watts, and I'm going to lose about 23 watts of power in RG8X. So I can run the RG8X 100 feet out to whatever antenna I have out in the yard, and I'm not losing that much power. It's not bad, but it's not great. So I did the same thing. I bought some LMR 400, and that LMR 400, instead of losing 22 watts of power at a perfect SWR match, I lose about 10. And as I go down in frequency, up in meters, so like 40 meter, I'm actually losing less. And you can use this calculator yourself and play around with it just to see what kind of SWR you're going to get, or not SWR, what kind of loss you're going to get. I'll put this in chat after the net's over. So again, this is NU, 1U for identification. What I showed on the previous slide was a perfect 1-to-1 match. So at a perfect 1-to-1 match, it shows how much you're losing. Problem is that you're not always going to get an SWR of 1-to-1. With my G5RV on 20 meter, I was actually getting more of a 6-to-1 SWR. So I'm not efficient at my antenna going out. And what happens is when you have that SWR and you have power reflected, you're going to get more loss. So on my LMR 400 that I was running with my 6-to-1 SWR with 100 watts, instead of my power out being 90 watts, my power out now is 75 watts. So if your antenna isn't balanced and your antenna is giving you some SWR, you're going to lose more in the feed line. Okay, so now we're going back to the RG8X, the thinner, cheaper stuff. If you're looking at an SWR of 6-to-1 on 20 meters, and I said it wasn't really that bad, well, now it kind of is that bad. You've lost half your power from 100 watts down to almost 50 watts because your SWR is now wonky and off. And the thing is if you're measuring that with an SWR meter, because there is loss in the line, the power reflected isn't going to be as much because you're losing some power on the way back. So your SWR, if you're using a bad feed line or a thin feed line, might actually hide the fact that your SWR is really high. Now, if you have an HF radio that doesn't have a tuner that can tune 6-to-1 and it can only tune to 3-to-1, if you add a whole bunch of cable and you get some loss so that your SWR is actually like 3-to-1, your radio can now tune to that antenna without a tuner because you've lost power coming back at you. So you're actually reading a pretty good SWR even though your antenna's garbage. Okay, so we went over a lot there. I'm going to pause on RF to see if there's anybody that has any questions. All right, nothing heard, and now we're going to go to Zoom. Is there anybody on Zoom that has any questions? Okay, nothing heard. Moving on, we are on slide 24 of 28. So we're getting there, crew. I'm glad that you're able to hang with me. It's a lot of information over those 8 months. Again, hidden costs with an HF radio. My IC 7300, just the radio. On top of that is an SWR meter that I always have running because I want to know what my SWR is if there's something wrong, and I also want to know how much power I'm putting out. Bottom left there is a tuner. That tuner is an auto tuner. If I hit the tune button, it will do its thing, start making kerchunk noises and match the antenna that I have connected. Above that, a power supply so that I can actually power the radio. Above that, a Raspberry Pi that I'm using for FT8. Connected to the radio is a keyer if I wanted to do CW. I really want to learn, but I don't know it yet. So I bought the keyer just in case I want to pick it up. Next to that is a headset. That headset needs an adapter in order to connect to the radio, which is another cost. So there's a lot of hidden costs, and you're not even seeing, well, actually you can. There's a piece of PVC behind there. That's a common mode choke. So that gets bad RF off of the outside of the cable before it gets into my radio. So between the RF choke, all the things that you can see, the feed line, the grounding, the lightning protection, there's a lot of costs that go on top of that HF radio. And that's the reason why I say that DMR and having that hotspot for a technician is awesome, because you don't need to get this HF radio with all of these costs to get out and talk to folks all over the world. Not to say you have to spend as much as I did, and you can get a simple HF radio that you can connect a dipole to, and it probably costs you anywhere between $500, $700. There's actually one on Bridgecom, I think it is, that's pretty cheap too for an HF all mode. All right, again, we're getting close. So with my HF radio, what I like to do is a mode called FT8. FT8 is an exchange where all you're doing is making a contact. Your radio is connected to a computer, and that computer looks something like this on the screen, where you're decoding audio that is coming in from another station that's doing the exact same thing that you're doing. They're sending out a CQ with their call sign that you can respond to with your call sign, or you're calling CQ and they can respond with their call sign. Now, for those of you that have used Morse code and used CW, this is identical to what you're doing, except you using CW and the keyer and listening, you're the modem. You're a human modem. You're listening to the dits and das, and you're translating that into the letters and codes that you're writing down and you're logging. With FT8, that's all being done on a computer. So the reason why you use CW, or one of the reasons why you use CW, is you can hear the dits and das when there's a lot of noise, versus voice, where if you hear noise and you hear someone coming in, sometimes it can be very hard to hear them over the noise. So when you're using FT8 or you're using some digital mode, what's happening is you're hearing all of the signals that are coming in, and your computer's decoding them to what you're seeing on the screen here. So you'll send an audio message that's encoded, and the other side is listening and it can decode it. And if I can give you just a quick sample of what that sounds like, I'm going to pause for the repeater and then turn up my radio that I'm running FT8 on right now. Okay, so if you hear that warbling, that sound, what's happening is the computers are all sending, there's a pause, and now they're listening while others are sending. So that warbling noise, that's the radio transmitting the computer speak so that other radios and computers can decode it. Because computers are really good at picking stuff out of the noise, just like CW and keyers, in a bad solar cycle, this is great to make contacts. I've made lots of contacts in South America, Europe, and the West Coast. NU1U for identification. I've made contacts in Japan. I've made contacts in Australia. I think those are my farthest ones. But with FT8, I can do it with my horrible, well, not horrible, but I have 100 watts and a wire in the backyard. I don't have a big beam. I don't have any amplifiers. This mode allows me to also play ham radio while I'm at work. It's just up on a screen to the side, and all you do is you click, and it does its thing. You can go back to whatever you were doing. The computer will make a contact, you accept the contact, and then you try and click and make another contact again. It's an easy mode when it comes to making contacts. The software that I'm using here to do that is WSJTX. There's a companion software that's showing the map there that's called Grid Tracker. I recommend both because it's cool to actually see on a map where you're making contacts. And then also it'll show you who you haven't made contact with, so you can filter to see who you haven't made a contact with versus over on WSJTX where it can show everything. It will color code it, but I don't know what the colors mean, so I'd rather use Grid Tracker. All right, a big part of ham radio that I didn't get into for a little while because I was using UHF VHF and logging isn't as big of a deal, is doing logging. When you're on the HF bands, usually whoever you're making contact with would like to get some sort of confirmation that you had a QSO, an exchange, a contact. Confirmed contact is called a QSL. And to do that, you want to use logging software so one, you know who you talked with. You have some record that you had made a contact wherever it happened to be. You can put in whatever information you want. There's different softwares that you can use. You can use pad and paper. You can use actual software. Online is really good as far as confirming your contacts. So Logbook of the World and QRZ.com, those are the two that I use. There's a few others as well, but most hams on FT8 and satellite, because those are two modes that I work, use both Logbook of the World and QRZ. So what happens is you upload your contact, frequency, time, band, some other ancillary information if you want to. And if the other contact has logged a contact within that same kind of time window, they give you a little bit of a leniency as far as when they feel that you've made a contact. It will show as a confirmed contact in the logbook. And with ham radio, we have awards for everything. There's awards for working all states. There's awards for working 13 colonies. There's awards for all sorts of different things. So if you want to win these awards, which are certificates that you can print out and put on your wall or put on your website or however you want to display your award, you want to log your contacts and you want to confirm your contacts. Okay, so with that, I am at the tail end of the presentation where I'm going to ask for any and all questions. And I'm going to first start on the radio to see if there's anybody that has any questions on RF, and then I'll swing it over to Zoom. Okay, so I got a question from AB1DQ, and James, if you could go off mute on Zoom as well so the Zoom crew can hear it, I'll turn my speaker down so we don't get any feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. So my question is, an excellent presentation. Thanks, Ant, for everything tonight. One thing I was curious about, I know you're a member of the Mars group. When did you join the club, and what was that like? And did you find your club useful in helping you out when you were in New Hampshire if you joined up initially? It took me quite a while to find a good club. I'm in the Meriden club, and they've been great. I'm also in the Shore Point club and the Yale club. When I first was licensed, I was in Rhode Island. I didn't really join a club, and I think that kind of slowed me in some ways. And when I was in the Boston area, I belonged to a couple of clubs, but I never attended meetings. I'm in 2 vibrant clubs now, and I really appreciate that. I just want to know what your experience was as a new ham with your local amateur radio club, if you had any. Back to you, Ant. And thanks again for the presentation, AB1DQ.
Okay, so AB1DQ. My experience with joining a club was a fun one. So I was part of the Donkey Dusters repeater club, but they didn't actually meet. It was all on the repeaters, on the air. It was like a once a month breakfast club sort of thing. I did get involved with helping do the nets and work the repeaters, but I was looking for an actual club to join. And I'm going to break for the repeater. NU1U for identification. So I Googled clubs in my area, and the closest one was the Middletown Amateur Radio Society. So I told the wife that I was going to go to a meeting. I had no idea what to expect. I was new, I wanted to learn. So one Tuesday night, I got in the car. The wife actually wanted to join me because she wanted to see what this was all about. And we met at Portland Senior Center with the hams, most of the hams that are still in the club now. So my first experience was the club treasurer, who welcomed me to the club, handed me an application, said, hey, it's only 20 bucks to join. You guys want to be members, right? So we did. And as far as learning goes, there's a lot of hams that have a lot of knowledge at our club. I didn't know the questions to ask. So the thing that was a little bit difficult for me to learn was the fact that ham radio is encompasses so much that I was just trying to pick up things as we went along. So our club does nets, our club does DMR, our club does APRS, it does special events. And I'm gonna break for the repeater. But a lot of it was I didn't know until I did. And field day was the one that really was the learning experience, because I had no idea what to expect. And it was awesome watching the crew put up the antennas, work the HF radios, and that sort of thing. That's an experience I would not have gotten if I didn't join a club. And our club has got a great group of guys. And we just actually went through Winter Field Day, where we came together, built antennas, we operated together, and making contacts is kind of ancillary to being part of a team that enjoys the same stuff. And then we also build friendships along the way. So I would highly recommend anybody getting into ham radio to find a club, join a club. If you don't particularly care for the club that you're in, find another club, but it's working with clubs is a lot of fun. So James, I'll turn it back to you. Cool. So, so for those on Zoom that couldn't hear James, I basically said that he really enjoys the Meriden Club, founded on accident on a 10-meter net, and that the club is very welcoming of new ham operators. And again, it's the good group of guys that you're with and having a vibrant club. I'll see if there's any other questions on RF first, and then I'll turn it back to Zoom, and then we'll officially close the net. So RF, any questions? Okay, so nothing heard on RF. What I'll do actually is shut down the net, and then we'll have like an after hours party for those that are on the Zoom session if they want to ask any additional questions off of the air. So with that, I am going to thank all the stations who have participated in tonight's Meriden Amateur Radio Club TechNet. Again, the next net's going to be on February 18th at 7:30 p.m. at K1 RCT and AB1DQ. We'll be talking about grounding and RF safety. Please be sure to mark that on calendars. 73, everyone, and have a great night. This is November Uniform 1 Uniform.
Thanks, Ant. That was a lot of fun. I appreciate you doing the net again tonight.
Anthony, thank you. Great presentation.
All right.
Yes.
Nice job, Ant.
All right, sorry, I just cranked my speakers up, so if anybody said anything, I didn't hear it.
A lot of thank yous. You've done a lot in 2 years as a ham, and that's good. One thing you didn't talk about a lot in the net, and again, I'm thinking about when I got into the hobby like almost 20 years ago, I was very, very mic shy, and a lot of times on repeaters, I wasn't living in this area, but sometimes people get into little cliques on the air, and they're not the most welcoming of new people jumping in, and sometimes it's awkward to do that. I struggled with that a lot initially. I found a good nightly rag chew net that took place on the Paxton repeater, Massachusetts, and that's the first time I got on the air and broke in and had the nerve to join the net, and those folks were very friendly and very helpful. So I really appreciate you sharing your story.
Thank you. Yeah, so as far as being mic shy, I think everybody gets that, and I kind of talked about it more the last presentation that I gave for this, only because I had a little bit less material, but mic shyness is tough to get by, and depending on what repeater you're on, you can call out and not get anybody to come back. So it's difficult as a new ham, and like you said, joining a club is a good way to go for sure. And as far as what I've done in the last 2 years, I've chose a very expensive way to do ham radio. I learned something and then I moved to the next thing instead of sticking with it. So like I first got into the repeaters, then I got into, you know, building my base station, then the mobile station, then HF, doing additional antennas, DMR, satellites, etc., etc., etc. So it almost seems like every time I learn something, I want to learn something new, and it's a crazy way to go about doing it, but it's been a lot of fun.
I think that's the way to do it. That's what I love about the hobby. You're always learning. I wish I had gotten licensed back in the novice days when I was a kid, but I didn't. So I came in when I came in as a tech, and whether, a lot of people argue about, ham radio licenses then and now, but the way I've always looked at it was the licenses are just they give you the skin in the game and they get you on the air. So, like you, I did the tech, the general, and the extra in fairly short order. And, I'm not trying to even compare it to what it was back in the day, but like you, it's like once I got the license and got on the air and got the privileges, then I started delving into different things, and I expanded my knowledge, and then I pursued things that I like you talked about wanting to get into Morse code, and that's something that I've been involved in, and I enjoy a great deal now. Even so, I'm kind of living vicariously as what it might have been like as a novice. I think Morse will always be around because I think people really do enjoy it, actually, a lot of the Morse operators I worked in the air have been, especially when I was new, were very understanding and patient for my sloppy fist. But I just want to echo what you said. It's a great hobby. There's so many facets. No one ham's going to do it all. And if you like learning things, it's like a cornucopia of things to pick up. So it's a lot of fun. So I got to take off from it. So I just want to say thank you again, and really appreciate the presentation tonight.
Not a problem.
I had a question.
Yeah, go for it.
So you were showing your ICOM 7300, was it?
Yes.
That was your screen?
Yes.
You were tuned up on 14.167? Or was that just a demo? It might have been just demo.
No, I was tuned up on, yes.
167.
Yep.
Okay. Sounds cool.
14.167. Yeah, so that was in the extra band.
Extra band?
Yep.
I'd have to look it up.
Yep, 14.167. I was in the extra band. So I wasn't transmitting at that time. I was just listening. I was trying to figure out how the heck the radio, how I could listen to a station. My first couple of nights with it, I was listening to a lot of shortwave radio. China, Spanish stations, Christian stations, anything that was coming in, super powerful, booming outside of the amateur radio bands, or sometimes in the amateur radio bands.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
I didn't know what I was doing.
Sometimes if you're listening on like contests, sometimes you'll hear the Europeans transmitting on the extra or the advanced part of the band, but they'll be listening on that band, but they'll be transmitting above 14.225
Yep.
on the general portion, so that that's operating split, which is kind of neat. I thought it was an interesting concept, but that's how a lot of people can take part of and the other interesting part of contesting, what new folks sometimes takes a while to know, is it's a great time to do DX work, because you hear call signs that you don't hear at any other time of the year, or only during contests. You won't hear those big gun stations unless they're contesting. And if you make a contact with them, they'll log it, because they do logbook of the world like everyone else does. And they want you as much as they want the next guy that's got a big gun or whatever.
So I've never worked a split station. How do you know, other than the fact that they'll never come back to you, how do you know when they're working split? Will they announce that they're working split, or is it kind of a pre-set up thing?
No, it's usually in their announcement. If they're calling CQ, you'll hear something like CQ, Kilo 1 Romeo Charlie Tango up 5, listening up 5, which means I'm listening 5 up from where my transmit frequency is.
Okay.
Or transmitting up 5, which is a different thing, but that's how they'll just announce it that way, usually during their CQ.
Got it.
This is W1DQ.
Yep. Go for it.
All right. You did an excellent job.
Thanks, John.
Covered all the bases. Your background is basically VHF and UHF.
Yep.
Just diving into HF. You just got a toe in the water.
Yep.
I use FT8. I find it very boring. It doesn't require any skill.
It does not.
And I basically do CW on the low bands.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are in a pileup, the station, the DX station, will advise that he's listening up, and you listen up yourself and try to find who he's working, and posture yourself where that is. So when the frequency is open, you give a call. You have to time it, because everyone's going to be on the same frequency trying to do it.
Yep.
You look at his habits, whether he's dialing up the band or down the band, and you try and predict that. There's a lot of skill that's missing on FT8.
So,
But you did an excellent job. I
Yeah.
can compliment you.
so the DX station that's working split, they will move frequency sometimes. They won't just sit on a frequency calling CQ.
No, they'll stay on their own
Okay.
frequency.
Okay.
They're looking to have a clear frequency. They don't want anyone. If they work simplex, then you only hear the strongest station coming back. If you just say I'm listening up, you clear up so that people can hear you
Right.
because they're not on your frequency, and you pick and choose who you want to talk to by going up and down the band.
Makes sense. So yeah, I know what you mean about about FT8 being boring. That's one of the reasons why I like it, because I can do it during work. It's not something that I focus on. It's like just I can still play radio when I'm not actually playing radio. The reason why I love satellites is probably the same reason why you love doing CW on HF, doing the DXers. It's a challenge. Working a satellite, a lot of things have to come together in order for you to make a contact. You need to make sure the Doppler is corrected. You make sure you're pointing at the satellite. You need to make sure the polarization is correct. You need to be able to find yourself on the satellite. There's a lot of stuff that has to come together. So I know exactly what you mean when you say that FT8 is boring. You don't get a rush by doing it. That's for sure.
I've done satellites also.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yes. Well, with an FT 991.
Yep.
Just by cross banding.
Excellent.
And yeah, I did the January VHF contest. I was able to work two stations at once. I had the FT8 on 2 meters, and I was doing 6 meters at the same time with a key.
Very cool.
Single up 2 radio. Yeah, so Ant, we've got when we eventually get back to the EOC and kind of face-to-face meetings, one of the things we've been working on as a group was establishing a ground satellite station. So what we did is we've got one of our FT 991As that we're going to, right now it's enabled on FT8 modes. So you can run FT8 on VHF from that side of the bench. But what we're also planning on doing is putting up a dual egg beater antenna system on our middle telephone pole.
Yep.
And we're going to use that as a ground satellite station to be able to contact. And we'll be able to do not only the FM birds, but linear birds as well.
Are you going to put a preamp on that?
Not sure. Don't think we need it.
Okay.
I've done it with Bofang, with a handheld arrow antenna and a Bofang. And I find that when you announce that you're a mobile or a portable, you become a little bit more of a wanted person, because everybody wants to contact the portable, thinking that maybe you're a unique grid square. But I think that more people, like if you somehow get it across that you're portable, people kind of clear the band a little bit for that. They kind of like honor that a little bit. At least I found it, or in my experience. It's not always that way, but I know I've seen it.
Yeah, I started on the FM birds obviously because I had an HT and I just connected the arrow antenna to it. But what I found is like guys just did not respect the fact that guys were actually trying to make a contact. Like you'd be in the middle of calling for a station and another guy would just call out his call sign, and they might not even hear themselves. They might not hear the satellite. They're just calling, and you're like, oh my God, I'm in the middle of a contact and I got 3 guys trying to talk over the top of me. It's a little bit easier on the linear birds because you have that pass band that you can use.
Right.
And it's a little bit more barrier to entry because you have the linear transponder versus an FM radio.
I wonder if you've ever found, and I have found this, and it's an observation as well. that when you have a pass that's like directly overhead, yeah, that's a longer pass, but I find it's more crowded. Um, like a pass that's maybe at 23 degrees. I have a tendency to get in on that pass more with an HT than I do an overhead pass.
23 degrees to the east?
To the west.
To the west? Really?
Yes. I
Huh.
use parking lots. I go to parking lots where I've got an unrestricted view to the west, and I've gotten 23 degrees down to 10. I've gotten down to 10 degrees.
No, on the FM birds, I've always found luck on the east because you're only hitting the east coast, and there's a whole lot less hams that can see the bird. So there's a whole lot less contention on the satellite. On the west, oh my God, I've heard nothing but, you know, station on top of station on top of station. Unless I'm on the linear ones. The linear ones, there's plenty of room to play.
Right? Yeah, the linear ones. Yep. They use one of my first experience with satellite was watching a couple of the Elmers in the club work a linear bird during field day for that 100 point QSO credit.
Yep.
They did it with an FT. It's either an 897 or an 817. I don't remember which, but it was on CW. It was on a linear bird.
Nice.
And I thought, oh yeah, I'm hooked. I'm all into that. That was awesome.
So they were working CW. Was someone acting as the rotor, or did they have egg beaters?
No, they had the guy had KB1FYL has an arrow antenna,
Yep.
and he had made this. He called it the salad bowl antenna because he mounted it to 2 salad bowls that was mounted on 3 crutches. Right, so he had this air antenna that he just rotated on this salad bowl, stainless steel salad bowl thing.
Nice.
It was awesome.
That is cool. All right. Well, it's getting late, so I'm gonna call it a night unless anybody else has any questions for me. All right. Well,
Thanks
thanks
again,
thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for joining. We'll do it again in a couple weeks, and then a couple weeks after that, and a couple weeks after that.
All right, take care, and thanks a lot again. Thanks.
All right.
Good night,
Have a great
guys.
night. Night, everybody.